So I'm going to talk about a little bit of work I've done with the World Health Network that can serve as a prototype for our science and policy library. So why do we need this library? We're envisioning a compilation of sources across disciplines to provide a thorough assessment of policy questions, right? And this is different from other collections of information like an individual journal or just using Google Scholar because it's interdisciplinary. It covers various fields, but the sources are identified by their relevance to a question. So content topic is useful, but the relevance to a question, like John said, it can be very multidisciplinary. And so we're sorting by question answered rather than just by content. And we're going to have more sources than just news coverage. It's going to be something that's more wide ranging and includes things that might have slipped under the radar otherwise. And unlike something like Google Scholar, where you just have to sift through so much information, this has meaningful organization and it's already been looked over. You know that those are not just collected sources, but they've been curated for your particular needs. So I was an intern in the House of Representatives last fall, and when I was bored, I would look at some of the publications of the Congressional Research Service, and that's a nonpartisan group that produces summaries of issues, and it can create research reports on demand specifically for people who work for the US Congress. And so it's specifically there to support policymakers' decision making. We only have access, unless we're working for Congress, to the publicly released policy descriptions. We don't have the ability to generate new ones through the CRS. So we need to make them for ourselves. And last summer, I was an intern with the World Health Network, and I was working on compiling some of the articles, sources from these articles that the World Health Network had published. So these sources were already organized into reference pages, but they lacked a complete bibliography that was describing what they discussed and how they were used in those articles. And this has turned out to be really useful. It's especially useful for communications because you have a bunch of sources that are easily organized and you're able to find it. I've been working on this project with some of the new interns. I have turned this information from citations and articles into this visual poster. So the fact that these sources have already been reviewed by the organization, in this case WHN, means they're easy to recycle. We know that they've already been vetted, and it's helpful to have these keywords to find what sources you're going to use for a particular topic. But the main goal is to inform policy. So the real benefit of having these bibliographies is that these sources are summarized and they're statements of purpose, which demonstrate which papers are relevant to a particular question. So having keywords helps us make it more searchable for a high level of research, just skimming through and finding sources. But having the summaries and the statements of purpose helps us understand what's truly relevant. So organically, this turned out as a system with keywords, the titles of the papers, and then summaries of basically the whole content. But because these sources were drawn from existing articles, it was easy to draft what I think is the most important part, which was the statement of purpose or use. Right. So, for example, evidence of endotheliitis and damage to the brain structures in COVID-19. This was just something that explained how a source had been cited in the paper, what the sentence it was cited in was about. But what this was pretty reactive, right? It explained how a paper had been used before. And the thing we want to improve moving forward is to make this more anticipatory, to allow us to sort papers for uses that might not be possible at a given moment. And I created this just to show that I included things that were very easy to search. You could just type into the search bar a certain word and the keywords would light up or the title would light up. But if you wanted to understand what was truly relevant to a particular question, having the summary or especially the question answered, the statement of purpose, how the paper had been used, was more helpful for getting a detailed understanding of what the paper could be used for next. So the questions that I think we should think about are how to know which questions a paper answered before those questions have been asked. In this case, questions had already been asked. And some of those were small questions. How does COVID affect this particular organ system? Some of those could be expressed as very large questions. Why is COVID something that we should be concerned about? But understanding how to sort these sources for future uses when we don't even necessarily know what they are, I think is the next step. And also understanding how we can use things like summaries and keywords that are a little bit overarching about a source to supplement our uncertainty about what specific things we might need it for in the future.